and welcome to the TheROCKATX online worship experience. You're getting ready to experience God on another level. Whatever you're seeking from God for your life is available for you as you praise, hear the word, and transform your situation. While you're worshiping with us, feel free to interact with our online ministers in the chat and share this broadcast with your friends and family so they can join you online. Also, make sure you subscribe and follow TheROCKATX on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram to stay connected to all The Rock is doing. Now, shake off the worries of the week and get ready to give God some praise. Service will begin soon.
It was the first time during President Clinton's office, reign in office, that now people started openly attacking our government officials, and you had people that got rich and became multi-millionaires off of rhetoric, Rush Limbaugh, and would sit there for 3 hours a day and talk about how bad, how evil, and all the conspiracies that the president was dealing with. But what happened even in the 70s, they passed a law because during the 70s, it used to be illegal for you to be able to report as news something that you didn't give both sides a chance to speak on. So during the 70s, you'd have to, if you wanted to report on this, you'd have to give each side an opportunity to speak about it and everything else. You could not be partisan at all. It was, this is what the news says. What do you say? Now what do you say? They passed a law in the 70s, a law dealing with media, where media no longer had to actually respect and to adhere to being impartial. And when they passed the law in the 70s, it gave way for a whole genre of news stations now that could be totally partisan. This was the birth of CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and they made it all legal but they had to pass a law in the late 70s opening that up. And so now you have entire news stations, media that do nothing 24 hours a day but give you an indoctrination lesson on whatever they believe. And I'm saying it doesn't matter, listen, whether you're conservative or whether you're liberal, both sides are giving you a indoctrination on what it is they want you to feel and believe. So Rush Limbaugh was the first that really got it kicked off on a national level in terms of radio and everything else. But now he could openly come and speak against the president. Now, I want you to understand something. It doesn't mean that we always agree with the president. But now you can speak against leadership, and you have the right to speak against leadership. I want you to understand something. You could speak against leadership, and there was no authority that could tell you could not speak against leadership. So now, during the Clinton era, now anybody that's in charge, you can speak openly against them, and you have the right of free speech to say what it is you want to say about who is supposed to be your leader, and use whatever words. And you guys remember, we saw the most blatant, and it shocked the world when President Obama was up doing the State of the Union address, and a congressman yelled out in the not in the gallery, but literally during the State of the Union, "You're a liar." And it shocked, because we were like, what just happened? And how in the world? And the world was like, what y'all gonna do to him? And the answer was nothing. So now Satan has unleashed this idea where now there is no authority on heaven, in heaven and on earth that you should respect. And so with President Donald Trump's era, now we change from not just the authority of the individual, now we say you can speak against the authority of the government and structure. So now we see now that not only can you speak out against the person, but now you can act out against the structure. And on January the 6th, we saw it on television where people said, we will overthrow the government. Now remember, I want you to understand something. I'm going to show you a real contrast. On January the 6th, we saw people attack the U.S. government, the Capitol, in riot gear, armed, breaking in, climbing through windows, pilfering through governmental officials' offices and information. But in the 60s, when you saw the fire hoses and you saw people sitting down and saying, I'm going to sit and I'm going to have a sit-in Woolworth and say I have the right to eat here, we said that is unpatriotic. We cannot believe that they would be so audacious as to be so unruly as to break the law by sitting on a bus, by sitting in a diner, by standing there and just saying, I am a man. And we said that was audacious. But in January the 6th, we see people attacking our Capitol and going in and saying, we're going to overthrow the government. And we call them heroes and patriots. I want you to understand how far we've gone. And listen, and I want you to understand that it is Satan, the God of this world, has doing what he's always done. So when you're listening to people preach, and you argue in your mind, you've got to realize that you've just been infected by the same virus. It's the same system. Anti-jurisdictional, anti-order, anti-structure, anti-leadership, everything else. Because what is this characteristic of this infected society? Three things. Anti-structure. Anti-structure. This is on page 103. That means that listen, you have to understand that people, we are now in a system, and we're now raising up people, children included, that are anti-structure. They don't believe that in the establishment. We've now, even to this date, we've had more mass shootings in America than we've had days of the year. We've had more mass shootings in America than we've had days of the year. Why is this? Why is this? Because we would say, wait a minute, so we should have gun control, but we won't have gun control because of the PACs, the political action committees, and the American Rifle Association is the largest and strongest political action committee in America. And those politicians understand that if I vote for gun control, I will be out of my job the next term. They will make sure of it. And so now we have, so think about it though, but when you look at these on 103, I have some things listed here. When you look at these individuals who have done these mass shootings, you see these same traits. Number one, they have resentfulness. Number two, they're angry. Number three, they have a desire for revenge. Number three, they have a sense of perceived social alienation. They by themselves. And listen, and because you're scared of them, you let them stay in their room by themselves. Because you're scared of them, you know, when they say, close the door, Ma. And you're, geez. And you're closing the door, and I'm sorry. They're alienated. Listen, but they have a tendency to leak their intentions to others before committing the crime. But nobody says anything. That means that you allow them, and we allow them to be active on social media with no guardrails, with no barriers. We give them access to the world and the world access to them. And we allow them to reign and rule, and we say nothing. They oftentimes are from broken homes. Fathers are oftentimes absent. They're oftentimes products of divorce. They've witnessed domestic violence, alcoholism, and all kinds of things. And these children were allowed to create their own life in their own space, carve out their own environment, and have their own room, have their own rooms, their own email, their own mail accounts, and their own identities, and their parents don't have the right to monitor them. It's because it's an anti-structured community. And so when you allow that to happen, that's what you get. Because I come from a family that my mama said, ain't no closed doors in this house. My mama said, this is all my house. This is all my house. Everything in here is my house. So we've got to be careful, because you come from a society that tells you to give your child, your youth, your young adults these freedoms. And you don't supervise them, and you allow them to live a life where there is no structure. You don't even teach your kid. Listen, you defend your kids. You don't talk to the teacher. So now you fuss at the teacher. What did you do? Because my kid said you didn't believe him. You don't believe your kid. You know that you know the kid lying. And if you believe him, then you the fool. Because everybody that knows your kid be like, don't believe them. And kids will cry on demand because they are manipulative. You act like you don't believe in me. I don't. No, I don't. No need to cry. We write that one down. No, I don't believe. Charles told me one time, he says, sometimes when you fuss at me and whoop me, you act like, I feel like you don't love me. Cut up all that stuff. I said, don't you ever say that again. I said, you know how I love you? I said, that food you eat, this AC you got, those clothes you got. I said, don't ever talk to me about I don't love you again. That's a mess you learn from some of your friends. I said, take that back to them. You got, because understand this, that your child, your teenager, your grandchild is being influenced by the guy of this age. So they truly believe it's right. And you truly got to know where it comes from. Because Satan convinced a third of the angels that he was right, while in the presence of God. So don't you think that the devil can't come into your child, your grandkid, and convince them that their gender is wrong and tell you openly, I was born in the wrong body. No, you out of your mind, all right. Now, that's true. That I agree with you. You are out of your mind. Now, the second characteristic of this society is anti-discipline. In 2019, listen, researchers said this, that the era of spanking is over. 2019, they said that, listen, when parents inflict such violence on children, it only teaches children to be violent and not disciplined. But the Bible says, spare the rod. That's what the Bible says. The Bible says, I'm going to use the King James Version, I don't mean it literally like this, beateth them and they will not die. But the Bible, what it's inferring is give corrective action. Am I making sense? You don't hit a kid out of anger, but you do have to give corrective action when they are acting inappropriately, and they need to they need to understand this inappropriate behavior will get these sure consequences from the people who love me. So anti-discipline, because kids understand this. What society doesn't tell you is that when you don't discipline a child, it makes a kid feel like you don't love them. And once again, the more that we have embraced society's world, think about it. We've got more money and more cars, and we're trying to emulate whatever it is we saw on television. And you're trying to be the Jeffersons if you grew up in the 70s. You're trying to be Dynasty if you saw it in the 80s. You're trying to do all this stuff, and you don't realize that when all those shows on Dynasty, they was always fighting by the pool. You're trying to be what is it? Basketball wives and Atlanta wives, and you're watching them fight. You're watching them pull each other's weave and wrestle in the middle of a lunch, and you're saying and then you're quoting them. Anti-discipline. Listen, and we don't talk about this. So you don't whoop a child, but you let them play violent video games where they're shooting people every day, where they have teams, international teams, and they're talking to each other and working out how to ambush each other, and they see that as normal. But we don't talk about the violence that occurs there. We let that happen, and then we let them buy guns at 18, but they can't drink. Now I want you to think about the logic of this. You can buy a gun. But you can't buy a beer. And so anti-discipline, even our today's military has fallen into this anti-discipline world, because now even in the military world, now they have cards where they can show their drill sergeants and hold up if they're feeling too much pressure. So during war, are you going to be able to say time out, time out, time out? I don't feel like fighting no more. Stop. And the Bible tells us this. It says, "Who enters into war at their own expense?" So the Bible tells us that we are not raising up young people to go on a spiritual cruise. We are raising up young people to be spiritual warriors. And these spiritual warriors have to learn how to fight the enemy. Learn how, when they've done all to stand. But we haven't put that in them. And so what happens is this. They've learned now to self-medicate. They've learned now to run. They've learned now to hide. And anytime they feel pressure, they see pressure as evil. They see pressure as painful. They see pressure as something that's not of God and everything else. And they see pressure as something that should not be placed on them. But the Bible tells us that Christ, at the Garden of Gethsemane, sweated until there was blood coming out. And he said, "God, if it be thy will, Dad, if it be thy will, take this cup from me." And the Bible says the Father said nothing. But the Bible says, but because of his obedience, as always to the cross, God has given him a name that's above all names. So we have to teach our children how to deal with stress. We have to teach our children how to fight through. We got to teach our children how to press through. And some of that means discipline. You got to learn no. And you got to learn no one time. Because the no you learn from your parents will be the no that saved your life when you're dealing with a police officer. But if you don't learn no from your parents, then when that police officer is approaching you and they say no, then you're going to put yourself in a situation where you're at a great disadvantage and could possibly be killed. You have to learn how to look at a person in authority, whether it be a teacher or whatever else, and when they say no, that's it. That's it. And the third thing is, so we got I told you anti-structure, anti-discipline, and the third thing is anti-authority, where there is nobody that can tell you anything. That's the season we're in. People say things like, I don't want to go to church. Why? Because I don't believe I need a pastor. I don't want nobody over my life. I don't want no authority. I don't need no authority. All of that is part of this whole ideology that has been passed down. So think about it. Now, your daddy is dumb. The society is dumb. Your grandmama is dumb. The Bible is dumb. And now the pastor is dumb. No one can tell you anything. Listen, and where do we get that spirit from? Satan says, I will exalt my throne above the Most High. Am I making sense? So whenever you have a system where you are seeking to exalt yourself above anybody, it's always satanic. We are people who operate under structure. We are people who underrate under authority. We are people who underrate under who live under discipline. We have to understand that there's sometimes God says no, and that's it. Ain't no other conversation. No, it's just no. Am I making sense? So listen, because you can't convince God, you can't out-talk God, you can't make God. God is God, and it's just, am I making sense? And so this is the world we live in, saints of God, and it's part of this whole idea of jurisdiction. The enemy has brought us into a season now where there is no more. We don't want to make. There's no jurisdiction. There's no laws abiding us anymore. So your pastor can't say come to church. Your pastor can't say so. Your pastor can't say help. Your pastor can't say volunteer, because there's no authority. Your pastor can't say the Lord told me we need to come here and pray. It's 7 o'clock on Friday night, and the Lord told me to call the saints into the house of God. We need to come in here and pray. The pastor can't say that. I didn't get enough notice. I can't stand last minute stuff. But the Bible says when the cloud moves, am I making sense?
Thank you for worshiping with us today. If you liked this message, you can find the rest at cmllcstore.com. We invite you to join us again for our extraordinary worship services every Sunday at 10:30 a.m., Sundays at 4 p.m., and Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. Central, where Dr. Moody teaches how to understand the Bible, and you can get all your biblical questions answered. We look forward to connecting with you. We ask that you subscribe to The Rock ATX on YouTube and follow The Rock ATX on Facebook and Instagram to stay connected to all The Rock is doing. You can also get connected on our website at therockatx.org. Again, thank you for worshiping with us, and be blessed.